Welcome to the Tank Magazine podcast. This week, Natasha Stallard speaks to the author Nicole Flattery about her story collection Show Them a Good Time and the dark humour pervading the book.
So welcome, Nicole Flattery, to the Tank Basement. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
How are you today?
I'm very well. Very well, indeed.
Cool. So first, tell me a bit about the collection, Show Them a Good Time, which is published by Bloomsbury. I was interested to know how long you've been working on this particular set of stories and what it's like to see it out in the world now, circulating cities in padded envelopes.
I know, beautiful envelopes. Very nice envelopes. I've been working on it, I suppose, on and off for 4 years. So it kind of started, one of the stories in here, Hump, was my first published story in The Stinging Fly, which is a magazine in Ireland. And then I just kind of kept working on stories. And another one was published in The Stinging Fly. And then Declan approached me about doing a collection. And we decided we would. And that was very exciting. And so just kind of written them over a kind of longish period of time. And then it's amazing though that like I had no intention of them all being from the perspective of women. Like there's 8 different stories and they all are. And I think
that's something I wanted to ask you actually, because that is something I noticed when I got to the end of it. But yeah, we wanted to ask you if that was intentional, accidental.
Yeah, it was accidental, like totally accidental. Maybe I knew by the last one that they would be. I wrote another story for BBC Radio 4 a while ago. It was much shorter. It was under 3,000 words, and it was from the perspective of a man. And then it just didn't fit for length. I was like, let's put it in. And then we decided against it. And I think it did. Like when I read over it a while ago. They kind of slotted together nicely, the stories, in a way that I hadn't expected them to, because they were written at different times. So, yeah, it worked out.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I guess there's a lot about female types throughout the collection, which is something I wanted to ask you about later. But first I wanted to also, so 4 years, what was the kind of redrafting and rewriting process like? Because when I think of short stories, I think of it as very much something that's sort of more of a form that's chiseled down. Definitely more than a novel, but perhaps even more than a poem. And I know like Laurie Moore and Alice Munro are like obsessive rewriters, and I was just wondering how that sits among your own process.
I feel the exact same. I rewrite a lot. I feel like I'm an obsessive rewriter, and one of the stories in the book, and I won't say which one, but I rewrote at least like 20 times, I feel, to get it right, like certain passages of it. And that can be useful, I feel, for stories, particularly when you're like concentrating on a sentence level. Like I don't feel qualified ever to give writing advice in any way, but I do say like rewrite. But then, because I'm thinking about a novel, and I also think it's useful just to get the first draft down and not think too deeply about it, and I'm not trying to make every sentence incredibly good, you know. But that's where like rewriting comes back into it.
And what do you mean by rewriting? Because is it sort of doing the entire story and then writing it from scratch again, or is it a very like more intricate editing process? I'm mainly asking for my own fascination. I'm like, how did you do it? Because there's so many amazing one-liners and so many amazing images.
I think for one story, the longest story in the book, Abortion, a Love Story, I've had to rewrite that a lot, just on like a practical level, because I had to make lots of it kind of like slot together. And how I would do it is I'd write and then get to a certain part in the story, and then I would go back over it and then kind of like take things out or add things in, or like that could be tighter or that could be funnier, then try and carry on. But like the story took me so long, and I was like, I just have to get it finished now. And that there is also something to be said for that. I guess I feel like conflicted when I even like give my own advice. I'm like, finish it, no, concentrate. maybe that helps. Maybe like to be split down the middle in that way is useful.
And how would you know that it's done? Because I think one of the things that I felt in every single story is it just they have this incredible pace to them. Pace not necessarily in terms of plot, but in terms of the rhythm of the sentences. And I think slotting, like you've mentioned a few times, like everything just feels so expertly slotted together.
I've read somewhere before, and I think it was like very good advice, and I couldn't tell you who it was by, but it was like a story's only finished when you feel like you cannot take it any further. And like I felt with so many of these stories, it took me a little while, or a long while, but I got them to an end that I felt.
There's a Raymond Carver quote, I think, which is he knew it where a story was done when he was only taking out commas and putting commas back in.
Yeah, because the thing is, you can get obsessive about stories, you know. You could spend so long on just one, or like getting that like beautiful opening paragraph.
And that's part of the fun, surely, as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is fun until it's not fun.
I mean, I wanted to ask you about Laurie Moore, because the reviews that I've read so far, I think every single one of them says Laurie Moore.
Yeah.
And I was reading your own review of her essay collection and how you said, presently announcing my love for her feels like a quaint throwback, like expressing my admiration for the microwave.
She's so loved and well known. Like me being like, oh, I love her, as people just like, oh. But
you do also write incredibly insightful, beautifully precise things about Laurie's work as well. But I was wondering how you're finding that comparison.
Undeserved. I feel, I just feel incredibly, I think she just, like certain writers just get you at the right time and age. And I was like 21, 22 when I read her. For the first time I read her collection, her self-help. And I was like, just like she had like some kind of like access into my mind that that I even didn't have.
I remember the first time I read self-help, actually, I was like, this is the nearest thing I've ever come across in literature, but also in my own imagination to my inner monologue.
Yeah, it is. It's true. And there's just lines in there that like have just stayed with me forever. But she's just incredibly skilled at what she can do, which is like the humor and the sadness. Have you read Who Will Ever Run the Frog? It's one of my favorite books as well. And she's just great on that, like, but also like female friendship and like pulling and showing. It's hard to like. I think she's such a unique voice. I don't think we've like ever have someone like her again. So. It's hard to. It's nice to get the comparisons. Then. I'll take them.
You'll take it. It's not getting on your nerves.
But if I met her, I'm like, I'm really sorry.
No, but I do think, I think you have something very similar in terms it's like incredibly nuanced but incredibly shrewd and sort of desperately funny. There's definitely that overlap there, I would say. I mean, I think your work is doing something different in an exciting way. I think it's not like a Laurie Moore pastiche.
Good. But also I feel like we have similar interests. Like when I reread like Birds of America recently, it's an incredible collection. They're just like, but she's so interested in like failure and like just like the like, and I'm very interested in like kind of failure and how you deal with it, and like just like minor letdowns and like in relationships, and just like there's nothing sometimes like ostentatious about things that like she does in relationships, but like just the quiet disappointments, I suppose. She does with like humor and sadness like very, very well.
Failure is interesting.
Failure is more interesting than success. I think, you learn more from it.
I had something slightly related that I wanted to ask you, which is, you do have, they're all female characters, and I feel like precarious and precarity are becoming quite overused terms these days. I'm just sort of seeing them attached to everything. But what I did feel that your female characters do live in circumstances full of risk. And I guess that risk is sort of this tango dancing with failure a lot of the time. There's risky men and risky cities and risky futures. But what I really enjoyed was like, rather than running from the risk, they sort of head into the very fire of it.
Good.
And like, exactly. Intensely inventing their lives. So I think there's also a sense that everything is made up, so you might as well make it up, and that kind of playfulness there. I mean, it's hard to really categorize all the female characters because they are quite different. I guess I wanted to know a bit more about your own feelings about the risk that they're facing in terms of poverty or bad experiences or kind of haunted by mental breakdowns. Is that something you see as your subject matter, or something that sort of enters the stories?
I feel that when I reread it, I was like, yes, this is my subject matter. I guess I find like there's something I find quite like humorous about failure and things like that, failed relationships. You sit around with your friends, whatever, they're the anecdotes that you tell, like in a very self-deprecating way, rather than my relationship is fantastic and my job is great and I'm really brilliant. So you don't tell those stories. And I guess like I'm just used to it. But the other thing about precariousness is that like it just reflects my own life, I guess, and the life of many young women. You know, we left college and there wasn't a huge amount of options and things look very unstable in every respect. And I think that kind of instability lends itself to the idea that everything's like a little bit of a joke. Like even like in that one of the stories, I think it's the first story, where she works in a garage. It's like this job doesn't feel real. Like everything feels like just a little off. You know, I've had jobs where you've been in offices and you're like, how is this kind of my life? You feel a certain distancing from it, you know?
Yeah,
and
like an alienation.
Yeah. And
but to an absurd degree.
Yeah. It's certainly heightened. And like I definitely feel like these characters are just like one step removed from their own lives. And that's because of a whole lot of, you know, circumstances, unhappy circumstances.
Yeah, and that touches on something I wanted to ask you about types. And there's this wonderful moment in the story track, which is about a young Irish broke woman, definitely in precarious circumstances, who shacks up with a famous comedian in New York. And you write, he liked to make mean, primitive remarks about his exes. It didn't bother me hugely. Types, the way he said types. I knew that a relationship could fall apart in the utterance of a single word, but this was not our word. And I guess I'd never thought before about, you see type as something that can be reductive or repressive, but I it made me realise how it's kind of this really petty term actually, and it's kind of has this absurd viciousness about it.
Yeah, it does. Absurd viciousness is a good description. Like I feel that I wanted to write a story about a comedian for a while, but I didn't really know a way into it. And then I feel that like as a collective, like I don't think I'm wrong in saying this, but like, you know, you look at the girlfriends of some of these famous men, you think you know them, and you're like, that's a certain type of, and at the same time you don't. And like I kind of wanted to write someone that was a little like more layered, because that's something that fiction at a very basic level can do, like just give someone like that like a voice, and like, you know, something that can make them more humane.
There's another also in the same story, it's talking about, you know, when she sees herself in relation to his exes, and it's what does she bring you in? He says poverty, I think, which is wonderful. And there's all these moments about sort of being this Irish woman and how she's kind of sick of playing the Irish woman, but then she loves playing the Irish woman.
Like me. Yes. Like me. I feel that, like, yes, I lived in New York for a little while, and you'd be very conscious of your Irishness and how it could be like used a little bit, but then also like disliking yourself for like using it. But I guess
it becomes like a trick to play.
Yeah, it is like it is like a
magic trick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I guess I saw him as this kind of like the male comedian character as this kind of person that, like, you know, collects experiences, kind of like vultures, from his girlfriends, and like, you know, picks from like a basic set of requirements, and this is what she supplies at the moment, and then he will discard.
Well, then he eventually leaves her for the woman who's playing his girlfriend.
Yeah, people keep asking me if that story is based in any way in reality. I'm like, no, this never happened to me. No, it definitely didn't. I wish it did. So I can be like, yes, it did. But
no famous
comedians. Not one.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story though.
Thank you.
It's really wonderful. Yeah. It flirts with the kind of derangement that one experiences when they find themselves in other cities.
I think that's a really good, I think that's probably a theme in a lot of the book, you know, that kind of strangeness and oddness you can feel in another city when you're alone and you're
because there's Paris in the book as well.
It's great, you know, in some way that everything is new and different and like a little off. Yeah.
And also you become, I think, like hyper aware of your own type, like you're saying, whether that's nationality or age or
what you can like almost like sell it, like you're selling a part of yourself, you're packaging. So I think that's very, very true. I never thought of it that way. There's certainly like cities and the things that happen in cities and coming back from cities, that is definitely a big part in the book, you know.
Yeah, the return as well. I think there's something that I think the stories gather really well is this sort of almost humiliation of moving to a new place and trying to make that work, and also the humiliation of returning from a place that didn't quite work. It's almost like, you know, there's nowhere that you can go that's not humiliating in that.
It's like life.
Yes, exactly.
I guess, yeah.
Life is humiliating.
So humiliating. Yeah, I think that I just guess, once again, when I left college, there was just like emigration was just the thing that like me and all my friends did. And if I wasn't emigrating at the time, one of my friends was. And like every weekend would be like someone's leaving thing and there's people coming back. And like them coming back is always a precarious kind of thing that, like, you know, I have friends returning now as we get a little older, and they're just like, they're still unsure, you know, they're just like, things have changed just a little bit for them. They have to readjust in this new way, you know. Their life is, they had to leave that whole other life behind where they were like a different person.
Yeah, it's spooky.
It is spooky, yeah.
Yeah, I also had another thing, again on the theme of type. Yeah, I just wanted to read another quote from your own book to you. And that's in Abortion, a Love Story, when Natasha says, who's one of my favourite characters in the collection, although she was alone, she didn't feel alone. She felt like a part of a large pantomime dragon made up of other women, a long line of them, moving and swaying invisibly through the city. I think that's one of the most striking images in the book, but, you know, and it does touch on this absurdity of females' kind of place in this world when you're trying to navigate all these different elements and costumes and types and boyfriends and beds, etc.
It does feel like you're trying things on. Like, I feel like in your 20s in that kind of way, that like everything does feel like a little bit like a costume. I think that was just like, that reappears.
And there are references to costume quite often. Yeah.
I guess that story was written. Abortion, a Love Story was written in around the abortion referendum in Ireland, and I was thinking about a lot. I had like no intention to write a story like that, but like then it was kind of hard to, I guess, like, you know, your work is going to reflect the circumstances that you're in, and then it just kind of happened quite naturally that I wrote it.
Yeah, I guess another thing I was really interested in the collection was also this kind of like purposeful confusion in all the female characters. Like it doesn't feel like this. I actually, because I just reread your Laurie Moore review, and you talk about how she writes women but with a lowercase. Yeah, and I feel that's something very much in your work as well. And I think there's a quote, Angela, who, when she's asked on it, she goes on a series of bad dates and she's asked by one of the dates if she's a feminist, as if she hadn't heard of the word before. And she says, at this stage in my life, I can take it or leave it.
I guess, I was responding. I think that, like, to think back on that Laurie Morris, the thing I love about her work is that she writes women that are like quite flawed and you know, don't strive to make great advances in their life, and are not pushing some kind of. And I feel like that, you know, like I don't wake up every morning and feel like a girl boss.
I was just about to say girl boss.
I mean, I don't like it. I knew I wanted the characters to be like that. I didn't want them to be like hyper intelligent or hyper anything like
aggressively productive.
No. The opposite of that. But that was something I was actually quite conscious of when I was writing. I also wanted them to have had, you know, made mistakes. I feel that, like, and trying to kind of change the person who they are, because I find that like very moving in fiction myself, like someone just trying to be different, change. And I think that's what these stories, a lot of them are about, like just someone trying to become a different person, or like love in a new way, or like grow, or have a different kind of friendship, or so yeah.
I mean, it is, you know, it does feel like it has that much more. It's not trying to propose any kind of feminism.
No.
It's essentially is, you know, feminist, but it's not trying to propose or control anything or be overly moralistic as well. Like, they all, you know, are allowed to behave quite badly.
No, definitely, like, moral. I don't particularly personally like fiction that has a strict moral code to it. I think about the moralistic of morals in fiction, that's a strange one. I just finished Kevin Barry's new book, and it's called
I've heard that's excellent.
Yeah, really, really good. And I think he's also very, very good at that. You know, he kind of takes you into this world, and You know, there's a lot of like drugs and a lot of like kind of illicit sex, but you never at any point feel that he's like judging his characters. And I think that's what I would aim to do. I don't know if I necessarily always do it, but I would endeavour never to judge my characters. You know?
No, I think I think there's a profound lack of judgment throughout.
One's needed.
Yeah. No, I think there's this wonderful sense of people sort of pretending to build lives and how absurd that is. It's almost like they're ironing a piece of paper and then at some point they just decide to rip it up into confetti pieces.
Yeah, no, it's true. But also, like, I guess that some of it also like stems from my own like fear of adulthood. Yeah, because like it just feels like you have to get so many things in order, and like so many of those things that like are absurd, you know, like the things that you're like supposed to get, and then suddenly you're not. And I feel that like even now, like so, like it seems so far away or so impossible for like buying a house or like all these things for people of our generation, you know. Yeah. So it just becomes this absurd idea of life. You know? Yeah,
that's true. Because you're still living in like a previous mold that's not fitted for your own circumstances.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I guess another thing that I wanted to ask you about is the form of the short story itself. Firstly, because I know you are working on a novel as well, but if you sort of fundamentally see yourself as a short story writer, or that's not really a consideration. But also I was thinking back to maybe even a decade ago where I felt there was a lot of hoo-ha about the short story as a form that was kind of more fitting to this internet age in terms of its format and readability and kind of potential for kind of, you know, a viral way of sending a story around the world, which I felt was really a very corrupt and clumsy way of looking at a short story, the short story form. I don't think it's necessarily something that should be ever billed as like internet friendly. If anything, I think they can be a real escape or a real kind of boulder in the stream. So I was interested in your own relationship to the form of the short story and also how you kind of see them in the contemporary culture.
Yeah, I guess, I think the thing about the short stories for me is that, like, when I started, I was a bit, you know, I started playwriting, so I wrote plays before this, and, like scenes and things like that, and something like a novel felt to me like a huge, impossible undertaking, and I didn't have the confidence for it. Like, I wasn't someone who was writing novels when I was 16 and stuff, and trying, like, I just didn't think I could do it. So stories were a way in, and then I realised I really enjoyed writing them. I think they do allow you, like, certainly what I gravitate towards, which is like surreal and the absurd, they allow for that a lot more than like a novel would in places.
Yes.
You know? Like
you can be a kind of more extreme in tone, I think, or more playful in tone. And absurdity as well. You know, it's hard to keep kind of absurdity going for a whole novel. I mean, it can be done, but it's very hard work.
Yeah, it's like pitched very high. And you're like, I don't think I can finish this novel. But yeah, so I guess it was the length which was appealed to me. But I write quite long, like my stories are quite long. And when I was finishing up Abortion Love Story, I knew that I wanted to try something longer than, you know, as the last story.
Because that is, how many pages in total?
It's like 70 something.
Yeah.
Someone sent it to me as a single PDF recently, and I was like, what? I read all this. It's crazy. But I knew that I could try it then, but...
I mean, I don't think they're in any way easier though. If anything, there's more opportunity to like zone in quite obsessively on language, and also structurally, I think they're very difficult as well to get them. Like you said, to slot them in, you know, that takes incredible amount of time.
It also takes a lot of like restraint. Like I think a story can be so good, and it's like I'm trying to think of a specific example. I won't be able to, but like in its restraint, that like if you can just, that's the kind of thing that like, you know, films I enjoy watching, or like that don't tell you everything. I'm not particularly interested in having everything explained to me. But if you can just, like someone like Mary Gates is very good at it, or actually recently at Tessa Mashfeg, her collection, like they get that one line that makes you go, oh, something is completely different than you thought it was, you know. You can like shift everything on a sentence.
Yes.
I can't think of, I'm never never can think of. Actually, someone just popped into my head there just because I reviewed him. Sam Lipsyte. He's an American writer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I haven't actually read that yet, but I've heard excellent things.
Yeah.
It's Flattery recommended.
Yeah. I endorse it.
Okay. Oh yeah, this was this is slightly abstract, but weirdly at around the same time I was reading your book, I read this fact about dolphins that actually reminded me a lot about the female characters in your book. Exactly. And it's about the dolphin sleeping patterns. So apparently dolphins sleep with one hemisphere of their brain at a time. So half the brain sleeps while the other half is awake, allowing them to swim continuously.
Why, really?
Yeah, and I read this, it was obviously came up on some, internet, whatever. But then I was thinking about, a lot of your characters are in this kind of, they're living very extremely, but then they also seem kind of extremely detached, but like simultaneously. And a lot of what they're doing is kind of managing that.
No, that's brilliant.
Path.
Yeah. I just feel like you're saying that because certainly switching off part of their mind like allows them to keep going,
Yes.
Yeah, because I feel that like certainly with like there is a bit of trauma in this book, and people not, particularly in the first story, someone not like fully recovering from trauma, and like kind of shutting it down, almost as a survival instinct, but you can only kind of do that for so long. But yeah, they're certainly like turning off a part of their brain,
I think there's a moment where Angela, when she's on her bad dates, she's eaten her salad but hasn't realised she's eaten her salad.
Yeah, lots of kind of things like little things like that,
And then in Track as well, there's a moment where she remembers that she's taken painkillers and had kind of forgotten that she'd taken painkillers. It was probably to do with the painkillers that she's taken.
No, it's a brilliant analogy though. I'd never heard that before about dolphins. It's cool.
It is cool, right?
I mean,
I'm kind of envious.
I'm like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're up to.
Yeah. I also, until I read that fact, I didn't realise that the different half of the brains were called hemispheres either, which I thought was really beautiful.
Hemisphere is great. It's really, really great.
I think it's Greek, so obviously they thought the brain was a sphere.
But like also just sounds like you're just split in two different, and also there's another thing in the book, I think there's a lot of kind of doubles. So like there's like two of like the psychic and Track who like appear as the double of her or double of her.
Oh yeah, and then she turns up at the house as a maid, but then at the end of the story, the protagonist dresses up as a maid for a TV show. So which is a wonderful layering of like messy identities where none of them are actually fixed.
Yeah, I kind of obsessed. Like I watched a lot of Twin Peaks, so kind of obsessed with the idea of the double, and even in a portion of story like Natasha and Lucy are kind of merged in like many different little
it's
ways.
that one vicious animal thing. Yeah. That's true, actually. That is quite Lynchian of you. Yeah.
I'm a big fan. I'm not like him either. I don't think he'd be too happy to do that.
No, but he's excellent though in terms of female personas and the splitting of them. Yeah.
I feel like
Twin Peaks and obviously Mulholland Drive as well.
I feel like I was taking that kind of like stuff in without even really like unconsciously just not even you're in college and you're absorbing all this kind of stuff, and then you're like you leave and it's all still in your mind. Like I feel like he was more of an influence than I even realized. I do like his kind of dreaminess, and just kind of he's very good at like instability, like they could all just like kind of collapse at like any given point.
He really takes narrative elements and stretches them as far as possible in terms of like how little information I can give you and you're still utterly transfixed.
And I often wonder how that works, because like if I go and see a film, like I'm willing to accept almost anything. Like I'll take, well, not almost anything actually. I saw Under the Silver Lake recently and I wasn't willing to accept that. But I'll just, maybe it's because you've got all the other imagery and like actors and things are giving to you, but whereas I feel like when people go to fiction, they need a lot more
like a handrail.
Yeah. And it's strange that like, because I think that I think the two forms are quite similar, but
you can do the same. You can literally have a girl on a bus. And that's it. That's all you really need.
Okay,
Okay, I think that's all of my questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Show Them a Good Time is an excellent collection, and I urge everyone to buy it immediately.
Thank you. That was my favourite interview I've ever done, actually.
Oh,
this was so good.
Oh, I'll keep that on the podcast. Oh, wonderful.
To hear more podcasts from Tank, subscribe on iTunes or follow us on SoundCloud. The theme music for this podcast is taken from Waiting Games by Kate Simcoe and the London Electronic Orchestra.